I wonder, is it possible to orient yourself each day in a way that allows you to live purposefully, accomplish the things that you want or need to accomplish, maintain your health, serve others, ultimately be who you were made to be, so that at the end of a day, a week, a month, even a year, you could look back and be pleased with who you are and what you've done? Or, on the other hand, is it absolutely necessary that we map out the year, set targets for the quarter, plan the month, lay out the week, etc., in order to live intentionally and productively? The content for today's episode comes from two places, and that's the first. This curiosity with the idea of everyday resolutions as opposed to yearly ones. And certainly I don't think yearly resolutions are bad, just that they're not the only way to live a growth-oriented or intentional or productive life. And I think no further than all of my grandparents, who were members of the greatest generation, who I don't know if they ever sat down in December and set resolutions that they would implement in January in order to live purposefully. Yet they lived very purposefully and accomplished a great deal and made a big impact in their lives. It wasn't that they didn't think long term. Certainly they did. It was just more a way of living rather than big annual structures. The second was an attempt to create a template that could be used to quickly provide structure on a day when you're feeling scattered or out of routine or unmotivated, or maybe ADHD is just kicking in really badly that day. Whatever, but you want to make the day count. You need to make the day count, and you need a little help doing so. And the result is a 5-step framework that can be used as formally or informally as is helpful to assist you in approaching the day with clarity and purpose and direction. I think it's worth consideration. It's what we're going to talk about today. But first, welcome to the Everyday Grit Podcast. Conversations to help you think critically, live abundantly, and endure the everyday. I'm your host, Nathan Hicks, and I'm very glad that you're here. Before we get into the episode, let's grab a bit of feedback and a review. Got lots of great feedback from the last episode, and I'm really appreciative. I said to you that it was a little odd putting it out, and then I think somewhere along the way I characterized it as putting something out that felt like a snapshot rather than a complete work, and that was a little odd for me. So I appreciate the feedback that it landed well and resonated. Even more, I appreciate the feedback that it was impactful and encouraging to people. And several of you let me know that you passed it on to others who you thought would benefit from hearing it. So I appreciate that. Heard from a good friend, David Henson. He and his family are lifelong friends. His brother Mark sits on the board at Higher Ground. He texted, "Grief and gratitude. Listen this morning. This was one of the best descriptions I've heard, maybe because I related in almost every respect. You articulated so many of the things I experienced with Dad in those final days. That was great. I sent to some friends that I know will appreciate it too." So Mark and David lost their dad a number of years ago in a similar fashion, lost him to a protracted battle with cancer. So their story and my story parallel a great deal. I also got an email from an old friend, Megan Napier, and that's the notes I have typed, but Napier is not her married name. That's just how long I've known her. But she sent a really long email. I described my grief as best case scenario grief. Some of what Megan has lived through, I would describe as anything but best case scenario grief. She's experienced some what I would call tragic loss, and has walked through those dark days. So I don't want to share her story. It's not mine to share, and I haven't asked permission. But I appreciated her feedback and her perspective. So Megan, thanks for listening, and thank you for the email. Jort247 left a review on Apple Review. He or she wrote, "This podcast gives perspective that keeps me coming back to listen in times of need. Refreshing. Highly recommend. Thank you, Nathan." Hey, thank you. Two things that David and Jort247 have in common is it probably took neither of them more than 60 to 120 seconds to either provide feedback or leave a review. So I'm just saying, for the cost of 60 seconds of your life, you can keep the reviews and feedback section of this podcast alive. So I'm asking, will you give today? Seriously, we've got a couple of reviews left and then we're out. So if you don't mind, that'd be awesome. Jump over to Apple Reviews and write us one up. I'd appreciate it. All right, let's just jump right in. I don't really have more of an intro than what I've given you so far. Everyday resolutions, five-part framework. Resolution number 1, look for new mercies. And this language will be familiar to many of you. Comes from Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. Lamentations is a book in the Old Testament of the Bible, for those of you who may not be familiar. And these verses tell us that number 1, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. And number 2, his mercies never come to an end, and they're new every morning. Now, I realized 2 things somewhere along the line. The first is that I tend to drag whatever emotional weight I'm carrying with me from one day to the next. So if yesterday was heavy, then when I wake up today, my default is to pick up at least some of that heaviness and carry it around until it's alleviated by some cognitive, emotional, or circumstantial resolution. And that's generally what happens. Either I've got a problem I can't solve, and so cognitively I'm able to figure it out and I feel better. There's some relational tension somewhere in my life and it gets resolved and I feel better. Or circumstantially, things just change and the burden feels alleviated. But somehow I tend to hold on to some of that weight until one of those things happens. Now, I know not everyone does this, but I also know that I'm far from alone in doing so. It's just very easy to carry an emotional hangover of sorts from one day to the next. So that's the first thing I realized, is my tendency to do that. Number 2 is the realization that the Lord's love endures forever and his mercies are new every morning. This is an objective truth that exists outside of me, meaning it's true whether I feel it or not. So on the days that I wake up feeling heavy or having dragged some burden into the day with me, this truth also exists, that the Lord's compassion for me has been renewed that day. And it occurred to me that if this is the case, then I can look for evidence of that mercy and compassion as I go through the day. And this does 2 things. First, it anchors me in the truth that regardless of how I feel coming into the day, regardless of how yesterday or the day before or the week before went, the Lord's mercy and compassion are renewed for me today, even if the feelings don't follow. Maybe especially when the feelings don't follow, I can remember this and be anchored to it. The second thing is it intentionally lifts my gaze outside of self, which opens me up to all sorts of possibility that wouldn't otherwise be there. So we have this truth, and because it is absolutely and objectively true, we have hope. We have a hope that is rooted in truth and exists outside of self. And it's this truth and then the hope that comes from it that serves as the basis for us to take this action of resolving to be attentive, to look for evidence of the Lord's compassion and mercy in our lives. Now, here's the thing. It may result in us feeling better. Sometimes it does. It may not. And it's okay. That's not the point of doing it. At a minimum, when we do this, we're reminded that we have not been forgotten or forsaken, and the Lord is actively working on our behalf. To be more specific, it's true even when we've messed up. In the context of the book of Lamentations, Jeremiah is writing these words that the Lord's love never ceases, his mercies never end, they are new every morning, on the heels of describing how bad off God's people are because of their own misdeeds. Life is pretty terrible for them, and he goes at great lengths in the first part of Lamentations to describe how awful it is. And it's their own doing, because of their own doing. And then he writes these verses that the Lord's love never ends and his mercy and his compassion are new every morning. And out of that, we have hope. So when we're in a bad way, even if it's because of something that we've done, the Lord's love endures and his mercy is new. So the first resolution is to go through the day looking for these new mercies. Second resolution just do the things that you know you should do. Most of us know far more than we actually do. It's not that we need more information so much as we need to do something with the information that we already have. There's a saying that knowledge is power. And while I agree, I would suggest that in reality, a more accurate statement is that knowledge is potential power. And it becomes impactful when it becomes kinetic. Look, the magic happens when we take action. So if we could do what we already know we should do, we'd be in a far better place. So if we wake up each day with that intention, do the things we already know we should do, we're off to a pretty good start. Now, admittedly, that's probably a pretty big list for most of us, and it's growing each day. So let's put some order to it in how we think about it. We're going to break things down into 3 categories. The first is that of self. What are the things that you need to do to take care of you today? Better yet, what are the things that you need to do in order to maintain an overall sense of well-being day to day, so that you're in a better position ultimately to serve people around you and to just be yourself, be the person that you were made to be. And we can further break self down into mind, body, and spirit. So mind being, what are the things that you need to do in order to keep your mind sharp, to stay informed, to avoid living in an echo chamber, as is so easy to do in today's culture. This may be reading something, it may be listening to something, it may be having a conversation with someone. But what do we need to do in order to develop and maintain the ability to think critically so that we can discern and appropriately apply wisdom in our lives? Second thing, body. This one's pretty simple. Give it food, give it water, give it movement, give it rest, and repair it when something breaks. I mean, in a nutshell, that's it. Obviously, the more you place specific demands on your body as a function of necessity or desire, the more you have to dial this in. If you have chronic condition that you deal with, you've got to be pretty specific in how you manage your body. If you have really specific goals as an athlete or in fitness or something, you've got to be more intentional and dialed in. But in broad strokes, it's not overly complicated. And again, most of us know a lot more than we actually do in the way that we care for our bodies. We know that we should drink a certain amount of water a day. We know foods that we should take in. We know foods we should avoid. We know that we should move. We know that we should get some sunlight. We know all these things. We just don't always do them. Furthermore, we know that there is an interconnectedness in our being. So when I say body, I'm not blind to the fact that what we do for our body exceeds just a physical result. It helps our mind and our spirit as well. Which brings me to the third aspect of considering self, and that is spirit. There are a lot of ways one might characterize or define spirit, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm using the term to refer to our spiritual, our mental, and our emotional state of being. These intangible aspects of who we are that are of utmost importance, really. So what are the things that you need to do in order to care for your inner self? Maybe it's journal, maybe it's read, maybe it's pray. Again, maybe it's talk to someone or listen to something. It could be listening to music, going for a walk, sitting outside. It certainly varies from person to person, and it likely varies for each of us depending on the day. What I need today isn't necessarily what I need tomorrow, although maybe drawing from a common list. So the first category in this do the things that you know you should do list is self. The second is others. What needs to be done each day to care for, to serve, to follow up, or to follow through with the people in your life? And this is family, this is friends, this is coworkers, whoever. And this may include just maintaining relationships, staying in contact. But it's more than that too. It's also helping to meet the needs of the people in your life and in the world around you. So take care of others. The third category is station, as in station in life. We all have different roles that we play at any point in time. And obviously these roles change as we go through life and enter and exit different phases. but each of them carries a set of inherent responsibilities. As a dad, I have certain responsibilities. As a husband, I do. As a business owner, as a director of Higher Ground, I have certain responsibilities. It's important that we factor those things in planning the day. Broadly speaking, we could say work, education, family, volunteerism, or philanthropic, or civic, or religious responsibilities. Whatever the case is for you, just consider the hats that you wear and account for what comes with each of them, and realize that we don't exist in a vacuum. There's a lot of overlap in the roles that we play and the things that each of those roles require. So do the things that you know you should do, thinking of self, thinking of others, thinking of station in life, and realize that though I've discussed these in a particular order, we don't always address them day to day in the same order. There are some days that others are going to be ahead of self. There are some days when station in life is going to demand so much that we don't get to taking care of others or self in the way that we should, and all sorts of combinations therein. Those are the things they get put in whatever order they need to each day. So, speaking of putting order to them and structure, resolution number 3 is make a plan. Formal or informal, it doesn't matter. Just make a plan and do whatever works for you. Maybe you have a big calendar and you map everything out on that. That's great. Maybe you work out of a planner and you see snapshots in time and that's how you do it. That's super. Maybe you have a journal and you have some means or system of using that. That's fantastic. Maybe it's a list in the Notes app on your phone. That's awesome. You know what? A scrap of paper works well too. Whatever works. The process isn't important. It's that we have a process that works for us that really matters. As an aside, anyone that tells you that their system is the only way or the best way is not just trying to sell you something, which I don't really have a problem with. But worse than that, they're either a fool or a liar. Because if they really think that their system is the only way or the best way, I don't know that they're the sharpest tool in the shed. And if they know that there are other ways, but they try to sell you on the idea that theirs is the best or the only way, that I don't know that they're trustworthy enough for you to buy their plan. So I'm not opposed to you partaking in some of the options out there and even paying for them. Just realize that because someone is smooth talking and charismatic and has something that looks cool to you, it doesn't mean that it's the be all end all only way to go. Have a plan, informal or informal, and then within this plan, prioritize your tasks on the basis of importance and urgency, always working toward living a sustainable pace, at a sustainable pace. I'm going to avoid chasing the rabbit of importance versus urgency. I think there's enough other people that have spoken to that. And I imagine that most of you are familiar with the concept that some things are important, some things are urgent, some things are important and urgent. And if that concept is completely unfamiliar and is a new thing to you, then just put important versus urgent in the search bar of your favorite search engine, hit enter, and I'm sure you will be rewarded with an abundance of resources on the topic. But as you make your plan for the day, do take the time to distinguish between what's important and what's urgent. And sometimes there will be overlap, as I mentioned. Where there's not, realize that sometimes important things have to be set aside because there's an urgent matter that needs to be dealt with. And this can be quite frustrating at times. It's just the reality of things, which is why I say work toward establishing a sustainable pace. And I don't know that that's entirely possible for every season of life. Maybe it is. If so, I've not reached that. But it's always worth working toward. I think to the extent that we can, reducing the number of urgent things that demand our attention each day generally leads to a more peaceful existence, a less overwhelming pace of life, something that, again, is more sustainable, probably lets us feel more in control of handling the responsibilities that are stewarded to us. There are a few benefits to making and following a plan, as I see it. The first is that a plan provides direction and it narrows focus. Of all the possibilities out there, this is what I'm going to work on today, and in this order. Second thing is it helps us manage transitions. I learned in the backcountry a long time ago that transitions are a trap. It's a place that you can lose time, lose focus, get distracted. And so having a plan and being disciplined to follow it helps you move more easily to the next thing after you complete a task. The third thing a plan does is it provides a sense of accomplishment. If you are a list person, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It feels really good to check a box on a list after having accomplished that item. And beyond that, it provides a metric and a way of accounting for the day. I don't know about you. I would imagine, like me, some days you get to the end of the day, you're tired, you're exhausted. You know that you've done stuff, but it feels like you haven't really accomplished anything. Well, if you have a plan and you've written it down and you followed it, then you can look back and you can account for what was accomplished over the course of the day. And it is a good metric and provides that sense of like, oh, okay, I did do something. I made something of the day. It wasn't squandered. Lastly, a plan makes it easier to stop when it's time to stop. I'm willing to bet that almost everyone that hears these words has more to do than can be done over the course of a day. And sometimes this mounting pressure of what's left undone can provide, one, a terrible sense of overwhelm, and two, this compelling that we should just keep pushing, and never let up. And a plan helps us say, this is enough for today. I have accomplished what I need to accomplish, what I set out to accomplish, or I came close, and I know that I will get to the other things in time. And when I get to them, I will do so with a sense of intention and purpose, and I'll have a plan. One quick note as we move to the next resolution. In the course of working out your plan, if you ever get stuck, and I don't know if, maybe this doesn't happen to you. Sometimes I get stuck. Maybe the day blew up. Maybe you get overwhelmed, whatever. But you find yourself frozen trying to figure out what to do next. I found that if I just do the next right thing and trust that even though my day has diverged from the original plan, if I just do the next right thing, when I get to the end of the day, I will have accomplished something meaningful and productive. Sometimes it's not the thing that I set out to do, but I'll feel all right knowing that at least I did something. I pivoted and got something done rather than nothing. Doing something, almost anything, when you're floundering, helps you get unstuck. At the beginning of the year, settling back into work after kids were out of school and travel and all the holiday transition, the first couple of days, my brain was foggy, and I would sit down and I had trouble focusing and I had trouble putting order to my professional life. And for a couple of days in a row, I would work for a couple of hours and then I would just say, all right, for the rest of the day, I'm going to do really simple, tangible tasks that will help me feel better. And so I cleaned out my workspace. I organized the physical space around me. I cleaned a shelf of personal gear in the closet. I took care of some gear in our logistics area that was not necessarily out of place, but was kind of bothering me the way that was put away. And it felt good. And in doing so, I was then able to kind of slowly bring my mind back online. And after a day or two of doing that, I could sit down and focus on the things that I needed to focus on and get traction and move forward. So resolution number 1, look for new mercies. Number 2, do the things that you know you should do. Number 3, make a plan. Number 4 is treat others well. Resolve when you get up each day that as I move through the day, I'm going to try to treat other people well. After making a rather me-centered plan and putting effort to living that out through the day, this resolution is a reminder to lift your head up and take note of the world around you. And in a different way than considering the things that you need to do for others that you did and the things that you know you should do. Differently than that, take care of the people around you that you encounter. This is paying attention to people that you come in contact with as you go through the day. It is being intentional about your interactions with them. And it's a sort of, it's an as you go sort of thing. Coming full circle in the first resolution, I implored you to look for new mercies. This fourth resolution, asks the question, could I be the tangible representation of mercy and grace and compassion in someone else's life today? And it's a surprisingly easy thing to do, despite having a profound impact. Quite simply, it's done by being present, by paying attention, really, giving space, taking an interest or showing concern as you interact with people, being sincere, listening, sharing humor. It's recognizing that our interactions with every human being are relational and not transactional, even if a transaction is occurring through that interaction. So it's recognizing that and then just behaving accordingly. And a lot of times it just requires the intention of lifting our head out of self, paying attention to what's going on around you. Resolution number 5 is be intentional, also known as pay attention. This is a really simple concept that comes down to 3 things. The first is be mindful and take note of what you're doing and what's happening around you. Number 1, be mindful. That's all. Just pay attention. Number 2, decide, is what I'm doing right now tracking with what I intended to do for the day? I made the plan. Is what I'm doing now following that plan? Is it what I want or need to be doing? And then be honest about it. Call it what it is. Sometimes the answer to that question is yes, I'm doing exactly what I planned. Sometimes the answer to that question is no, I'm not. I'm doom scrolling and I've been on Instagram for 30 minutes and I've just wasted time and this was not on my plan. Sometimes you'll find the thing you're doing is the same, but the answer is different. So maybe you're on Instagram and you said, oh yeah, I gave myself 5 minutes between tasks. This is that 5 minutes, or I'm on here for 20 minutes to do some work stuff and then I'm getting off. Same act, different answer to, is this the thing that I want or need to be doing? So make the decision, am I tracking? And then assess, should I continue on? Maybe or maybe not. If it's the thing that you intended to do for the day, most likely the answer is yes, continue on. If you got distracted and suddenly you're putting gear in order instead of mapping out your month, maybe the answer is no, go back to the more important task. Maybe the answer is, you know what? Yes, this is working and I have time and space to get to the other thing at another time when I'll be more efficient or productive in doing that task. This practice, being intentional, it just helps us to be aware, both self-aware and situationally aware, and it increases the likelihood that we'll that we'll accomplish what we set out to accomplish, and that our days will have a sense of meaning and purpose, because even when we've changed course, we've done so on purpose and we've not been surprised by it. So as a recap, look for new mercies, right? That's the first resolution. Second one, do the things that you know you should do, self, others, station in life. Third is make a plan. Fourth is treat others well. Fifth is be intentional. I think I put pen to paper on this outline a couple of months ago. One morning I sat down with a cup of coffee to put some structure to a day that I knew I could easily squander if I wasn't careful. There was a lot of transition at that point, and this was kind of a day in between some transition. And I knew if I'm not careful, I'm not going to have much to show for the day. And I don't want that to happen. And quite frankly, that's not what needs to happen. So I made my list. After I made the list, I set back. This was kind of around the new year. So I had this idea of the new year resolution versus daily resolution kind of rolling around in my head. So I made the list and I sat back and thought, okay, what did I just do here? Can I go part to whole or micro to macro? Can I take this list and zoom out and determine what process I use to make this list for the day? And then can I create structure? That's where these 5 everyday resolutions came from. And I hope that it's useful to you in some way, whether it's a small reminder of things to consider, or maybe a major overhaul to the way that you think about your days, Although I think you know me well enough by now to know that I never assume that anything is a major overhaul. But hopefully, self-deprecation and humor it's just fun for me. Look, I hope this is encouraging, maybe to do some things you already do, maybe to do some things differently. But I trust that it's a nod in the right direction. I would love to hear what you think, though. If you think that this is all worthless and of no help at all, then let me know why. If you think that there was some good takeaways for you, that'd be great as well. And certainly, if there's something that I missed, please let me know that as well. That will make this podcast better. That will make me better. And it'll let us interact, which is a gift, I think. So if you're so inclined, drop me an email to everydaygritpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. You can also shoot me a direct message or text if you have the means of doing that. This can't be a conversation without you. The Reckoning, next one is coming up May 2nd and 3rd. It's a standard edition. It'll be a route very similar to what we did last May. If you are interested, email that same email address, everydaygritpodcast@gmail.com, or reach out to me in some other means and let me know that you're interested. I'll open registration for that in the next week or two, and that will probably start by me just reaching out directly to the people that have said I'm in or I'm interested, and then I'll put it out on social media. But if you're interested, let me know. I'd love for you to join us. Hey, if you'd help me by spreading the word about this podcast, I really appreciate it. If you know someone that would benefit from it, let them know, share it on social media, whatever you want to do. Word of mouth is the best. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you guys and you taking the time to both listen and respond. If you would like to follow along on Instagram, you can do so. My personal account is @NJHIX. The podcast is @Everyday Grit Podcast. Thanks for listening. Carry on.